The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome Batsoupyum. Batsoup is a legendary art collector specializing in tokenized digital art, and he has one of the most recognizable brands in that space. He is a lover of memes. He is part of Team 6529. In this interview, we take stock of art, NFTs, how they're defined, and opportunities for future growth. We deep dive his own collecting origin story, a hash mask, his approach to collecting, and highlights of that journey, including a fortuitous Skull of Luci, first works from Claire Silver and Grant Yoon, Alotta Money, the SuperRare Pass, Matt Kane, and more. I think you'll enjoy Batsoup's grounded perspective, his deep-rooted experience, and his honesty in reflecting on the journey. Let's get to it. Batsoupyum, welcome to the future of art.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Roger. I appreciate it.
We've been kicking around, thinking about doing this interview. You know, you're famously, infamously, in a positive way. You're both out there and very vocal, but you're also a bit behind the scenes.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a fairly shy person in real life, and I don't really care about the spotlight or any of that shit. I'm just sort of like here to help, try and do my part, help out. I'm enjoying myself. I hope other people are enjoying themselves, even though it's a bear market. I do a lot of shit posting. I admit it. I enjoy that part too. I'd probably be a little less infamous if I wasn't such a prolific shit poster, but you know, here we are, and I am who I am, and I'm, like I said, I'm here to have fun and not just, you know, I don't know. Fun is just part of the space, right? I mean, it's just endemic to what we're doing here. So I don't see why we all shouldn't have a little fun. I think I've been labeled like the Dick Butt King or what have you, and it's a label I wear proudly. I don't think it's going to get me a job necessarily at the New York Federal Reserve or anything, but I don't really want a job at the New York Federal Reserve, so I'm having fun. It's good.
You know, exactly how you describe yourself comes through. It seems like you are someone truly who does not need the spotlight, right? But you also seem like someone who can't help himself sometimes. You know, flex your voice a little bit, get out there, have some fun.
Yeah, I'm not like out there seeking the spotlight. I know that's probably like people are probably like calling bullshit on that, but I do these spaces probably like once every couple months. If I was really out there trying to promo myself, I think I'd do them a lot more often than that. And that's not a dig on anyone who's doing them. I'm just like, I have a pretty comprehensive life outside of NFTs and enjoy doing other things. And I enjoy the privacy and, things like that as well. So really happy to be here, really happy to be a supporter in the space, and also really happy to have, boundaries and limits around what I'm going to do online.
Here's the fixed question, really the only fixed question of the day. This is an organic, raw conversation. Let's see what we find. But the fixed question I will ask you is this: how do you define art? What does art mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've thought about this. I generally, these are questions better left to philosophers and pundits and things like that. So, and I think that in itself is artistic, because that is art. It is, what does it mean to you? What does it make you feel? What does it make you think about? What is it? I think art is like, historically these like posters and paintings and sculptures and all that. But, art can simply be a landscape that you see and never photograph, but you remember for years and years and years. I mean, that's art to me, because it made me feel an emotion at the time, and I recall it fondly, and it makes me happy and things like that. Art is, to me, an expression of human creativity. And that can take many, many forms. I mean, there's like a semiconductor is a beautiful piece of art to many people. If you ask people in that business, now you and I and people on this call are probably like, that's just so geeked out and ridiculous. But there is artistic expression in things like that. And I think where art really matters most is when you take concepts and memes and things like that, and you express them creatively. I think that's the most interesting part of art to me is when you can take a very simple concept and turn it into something thoughtful and beautiful or what have you. We can get into aesthetics versus thoughtfulness and all that. I think that's a huge topic with AI, by the way. But to me, that's really what art is all about. And again, I don't think that's the definition. I think that's just my definition.
I like that you keyed in on the exact reason that question is asked. The wide range and diversity of responses is what really we're here for. And I love that everyone has at least a slightly, if not majorly different response. I'm always interested to see whether people go the inclusive or exclusive route. Again, every opinion is valid, every definition is valid, but that's one that particularly interests me because I think you'll get the, art has to be this way and it starts to box it in a little bit. And then the other side, you'll get a lot of, well, everything is art in some ways. And then there's obviously a differentiation as to what is good art from that definition.
Yeah, and you really get into, it just annoys me sometimes on Twitter, and I just turn these conversations off, to be honest. But you get it, you get at the definition of what art is, and people start fighting about it on Twitter, and then, people start blasting guys like Jerry Saltz, who, are art pundits in the trad art world. And, that's a very outward emotion. The real question is, what's the inward emotion? What did it make you feel? What did it make you think at the time? And, I don't know. I have a real problem with people defining what art is in this space, and claiming that they know what it is and criticizing it or praising it or whatever. Because I just don't think I don't even know what it takes to be qualified in this space as an art critic. But I just know that the people here right now that are criticizing art are not it.
Well said. Very well said. I tend to side, with the parameters you're putting around it, which are not many, which I think is very useful.
Well, we're literally I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rod. We're I don't know, 10 years at most in the blockchain, maybe 15 for Bitcoin. And and we're already getting into the definitions of what, is good and bad digital art. Trad art has been around for centuries, millennia. And, we've gone, maybe 5 years on blockchain with digital art. And all of a sudden, people know and can define for you what is going to be the best stuff and the worst stuff of the future. I have a hard time believing that.
Let me give you a topic to sink your teeth into. It's a topic you've spoken on before, but I want to lob you some softballs here. So there's a quote, and it's pinned to your Twitter account, your X account, and it says this, quote, "Lumping digital art in with PFPs and calling them all NFTs so people can quickly and easily dismiss an entire package and lazily move on will go down as one of the biggest blunders the art world has seen in our generation." End quote.
Yeah, that's me. I wrote that, I think, after that was a couple weeks ago, after a period of just very intense selling off, especially in PFPs. And most people, I think, know what PFPs are, but for people that don't, we're talking about the representation, the digital avatars, the things like the apes and the punks and Pepes and things like that. And it's just always been so weird to me that the market is being defined by that. That's what the New York Times writes about. That's what the Rolling Stone writes about. That's what gets all the attention. Oh, those dumbass crypto, bros and folks over there, they're trading all this stuff. Well, there's an entire area of creativity being ignored by the media, because, which is called the digital art space, and which has nothing to do with that whatsoever. The only commonality between digital art, to my mind, people are going to yell at me after this because they're going to say, well, PFPs are art too, and I don't really care to get in that debate, whatever. But the only commonality is that they're both traded with crypto. So, what does Ayla Musa's latest drop have to do with Springfield punks that just came out after the Homer Simpson, after the Simpsons episode? Nothing whatsoever. It's the same as comparing, a recently discovered Warhol to a new plushy toy that comes out at Walmart and Costco. These things, yeah, you buy both with US dollar, but other than that, there's really nothing in common with them whatsoever. So it just gets a little bit I'm not going to say annoying because it's actually been an opportunity, I think, to collect digital art while everybody's paying attention to PFPs. But it's stupid. I mean, it's ridiculous when you think about it. It's like I don't know why digital art would have anything to do with that stuff. So, I mean, I'm open to suggestions on why I'm wrong, but I don't think I am on this one. Maybe I am. I don't know. I'm wrong a lot.
I think you're largely right, and I think we could trace back the reason just that how small the space started, right? And it did start the exact construct you talk about, crypto, right? Literally, that's what we were using to collect and to purchase these things. And PFPs launch on the same cryptocurrency that art is exploding on, and the space is still so small with so few relatively collectors and artists in it at the time that basically anything that comes in is going to be looked at initially through the same lens. And then the space grows. And even though I think you'd agree we're still quite small, relatively speaking, but it has grown quite a bit from that time. And then it grows, and then we start to have those sometimes aggressive debates, right? And as it fractures, as it should, and it starts to niche a little bit more.
Yeah, and I don't want to. This is, by the way, not a criticism of PFPs. I actually think there's a phenomenal use case for PFPs in the future as your digital representation in some sort of metaverse world. And I do think, as of right now, I kind of represented this in that inverse triangle that I made a couple of years ago, and I still think it's true today. Where I really think PFPs are kind of the gateway drug into the ecosystem. I don't think there's a lot of people who come in from the one-of-one art side. I think there's certainly exceptions to that, and I think there's quite a few that do. But I think the majority of people, they get gifted, some weird kitten or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, what's this?" And then they explore a little further, and they see, "Oh, there's an entire NFT ecosystem here. Oh, look, there's generative art. Oh, look, there's one-of-one art," and they think it just sort of cascades after that. Once you're in the Ethereum ecosystem, I think for the most part, people tend to stay in the Ethereum ecosystem, and that really, again, I think PFPs are kind of the gateway drug to the whole ecosystem in the same way that maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum are the gateway drug into the shitcoin world and the DeFi world and all that. So I think that's what's going on, and I think that's likely to persist for a while because getting into the ecosystem by any other route is really hard right now. And, we can talk about that later and so on and so forth. But anyway, I didn't want that to come across as a criticism of PFPs. I think they both have their use cases and are able to exist, separately.
What was your gateway drug into art specifically on Ethereum?
It was a hash mask. I bought so the story goes, and I've told this a couple of times, so I apologize if people have heard this. The story goes like I'm not a gambler, but it was very clear to me back during the election that Joe Biden was going to win. If you just did like a state by state analysis on what was going on. I mean, in the United States, we have an electoral college that elects the president. So, whatever the popular vote says is more or less irrelevant. You have to go state by state. So I found a website called Polymarket to express that. And the guy who founded Polymarket is this collector on SuperRare named Esquiat. He owns like Fuosis's Genesis, and he owns a bunch of other really good stuff. And he used to talk about it in Discord, and I was merciless. I was so mean to him. So Shane Copland, if you happen to be listening to this podcast or Spaces, I apologize to you profusely. But it got my attention, and I ended up buying this hash mask, and I lost, in like a matter of a week, I lost like $200 on it, which, to some people is a ton of money. And in the context of what I've bought since then is like not even a rounding error, but I was like apoplectic. I was so pissed at myself. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And I just lost $200, and this confirms that I'm an idiot and I'm never doing this again. Well, like a couple of days later, I did it again. And then a couple of days later after that, I did it again. And now it's been almost 3 years, and it's like I can't stop doing it, I guess. I'm a complete addict. But the hash mask, which I did sell and I don't own anymore, I probably should try and figure out a way to get it back, because it really is kind of a memento at this point for me. But yeah, that was the first thing I ever dipped into, and then mostly digital art after that. But I've made a lot of mistakes in PFPs as well. So,
how about tracing your lineage on ETH after the hash mask? What would you say is the first very positive event? Right? Whereas that initially started in a negative place with the energy, but where did that start to turn for you?
Do you mean in terms of art? Or do you mean in terms of NFTs overall?
I would say whatever comes earliest, just charting the course forward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the one, if you put art aside for a moment, and I think art has many of these qualities, by the way, but if you put that aside for a moment, the only thing I think that really, really matters that you can really hang your hat on right now is historic. I know there's a lot of people that are like, well, the whole space is so emergent, but a lot of people are like, oh, we're building community and utility and all that. And I never really bought into any of that. Nobody's done it well enough yet where I can say like, wow, that's going to do really well. And I'm definitely one of those folks I'm not going to be a leader. I'm not going to be the person that's going to go and be like, wow, I really think this, you know, I'm not picking up board A's, but there's a lot of utility promise there. And I'm not going to be the leader to try and figure all that out. It's too hard. But what I will do is watch it carefully. And if I like what I see, I'll start buying. So early on, it was, I think historic was the one thing that really resonated because I used to collect baseball cards, and that always was like, you could always hang your hat on historic. You always hang your hat on a 1952 Mickey Mantle or a, Ricky Henderson rookie card or what have you. So it was like that I knew for a fact would matter. So what really got my attention early on was Robbie Barrett. He's the first person to mint on SuperRare. Actually, he has the first 4 mints. And what I really resonated with was the story of the Lost Robbies. It's such a cool story. I think it's just fascinating how in 2018, they broke ground and people were, they handed out all these, 300 of these at a Sotheby's event. And these were art forward people in the audience, right? I mean, these weren't like, our parents or brothers and sisters or what have you. These were like people who were very open-minded about art. And most of them threw it out. I mean, that's pretty remarkable that you go to an art event, you literally get a piece of artwork for free. And most folks were like, this sucks. I'm going to, I don't really care about this, and toss it in the garbage. Roughly, I think there's like 45 people that didn't. And the 45 people who minted on SuperRare, those are historic, to me at least. Those are very historic relics and a part of art history. There's a GAN/AI aspect to this that I think is super interesting. Robbie no longer, mints because of environmental concerns with Ethereum. I'd be curious what he thinks of that today after proof of stake launch, but what have you. But that's fine. But in terms of what really got me, I think that was the one that really got me. And then, you can follow that up with early mints. I bought the second X copy mint from Zach Yanger, who's SuperRare Roses, who wants to kill me for doing it, but he got a wedding ring and a house out of it. So I think he's doing okay. And then, I branched out into punks and Pepes. I think some of this historic stuff you can really hang your hat on. And then there's just some stuff that's most of the folks I think that are in this space are really sort of groundbreaking right now. And some of this stuff, it's very clear that, there's glitch art, for example. I mean, I see Patrick on this call, Patrick Amadon, and glitch art is, a form of art that you can just never replicate in a trad art world. I mean, that is a phenomenal innovation in art, to me at least. And it's being captured and appreciated now because of blockchain. So those are the two probably big ones, but I could talk all day about this topic for sure.
How do you feel about some of those trends coming full circle? So what we've noticed recently is a lot of smoke around those early AI pieces. Obviously the ones you're discussing sort of have always been in view, but there's a lot of other artists who maybe weren't so much. And recently we've seen a couple collectors in specific dive into the 2018, 2019 mint annals of early GAN models and start to pick up some of those. And then recently in the known origin streets. But how do you feel about that, seeing it come full circle?
Yeah, I think that trend is probably going to continue. This is not financial advice or anything, but AI is going to be such a disruptive force. I think it's even the most bullish people on AI are still not bullish enough. It is going to be a massive innovation in our lifetime. And that, again, going back to historic as a factor for thinking about, the future, historic is going to matter a lot. And if you take, the AI is some of this GAN art and early AI art is going to be very similar to the types of things you see I mean, I just saw recently at auction, I think early boxed up, like the very first Nintendo gaming system that was boxed up, and one of the early Atari 2600 systems. These things are selling now for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think there's an analog there to be made with some of this early AI art where, this is going to be a part of our lives for probably certainly the rest of our lives and probably the rest of humanity. And if it doesn't kill us, by the way. And, I think there's going to be these early AI art pieces are definitely super interesting from both artistic and evaluation perspective. So I'm happy to see it continue. I think there's other use cases, there's other historic factors in other forms of art too in this space, but AI certainly seems to be a really good candidate for this.
I'm going to throw a date at you, change the subject just a little bit.
Yeah.
The date is August 4th, 2023. Can you pin that down?
August 4th, 2023. No, I cannot. I'm trying to think of what I was even doing that day. I can't. I can barely remember yesterday.
You were waking up. Maybe, I don't know if you're a coffee fanatic or not, but maybe sipping on a cup of coffee and happen to go to the website SuperRare, and on that website, someone has listed a Skull of Luci for 15 Ethereum.
Oh yeah, right. Keep going.
And what a day it was! I found it so fun and so fitting that it was you who got it. Who and listen, for everyone, just to fill people in here, there was a bit of a disconnect. There was somebody who unfortunately was unaware that there was a whole OpenSea ecosystem and surge going on within Skulls of Luci. Maybe they were trained, their eyes were trained more on the SuperRare side. There was no sort of floor to compare it to, and that's where it ended up being listed. And you, sir, were the recipient.
Yeah, that was a weird day. I was actually on my way out for 4 straight days. I was going to do a camping trip with some friends. And I was leaving in an hour. I happened to look in the morning, and I'm really good friends with Anonymix in this space. And I know he has a Skull of Luci. And so I texted him and I said, "Hey, is this real?" I mean, of course it's real. It's on SuperRare. But I said, "Hey, is this real?" Because I didn't believe it. And he was like, "Oh my gosh." And I just right place, right time on that. I mean, the funny part about that story is the initial reaction to people they were pissed. I mean, people were like overtly angry at me because I was able to find this thing. They thought it was a scam. And I was like, I can promise you it's not a scam. I don't even know who this seller is. And it was sitting there. I had to go and kind of track down the story and explain it to people because it was actually sitting there. And if you look on blockchain, you can verify this, but it was sitting there for 6 hours before I grabbed it. So it's not like, I had some sort of like backdoor into this and ripped someone off. I just saw it there and grabbed it.
And that's my favorite part of the story. I mean, one, from the angle of there's always, I think we all realize this at this point, there's always, for whatever you're interested in, whatever facet of art, whatever time, place, and circumstance, whatever price level, whatever it is, there's always something, right? There's always something going on. There's always those types of stories percolating around. And the fact that it was sitting there for 6 hours, and with such an illustrious, like multi-account, super rare collection, that you stumble upon it first. Again, it just feels very fitting to me, even though that day I cried many tears.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Roger. I don't mean to make you cry. This gets to sort of like, this is my generally my life right now. I don't know, like maybe I wouldn't admit that to my mom, but like this is like, there are there are artists on this call right now. I'm looking through this list where I look at every single day, maybe multiple times a day, certain collections of theirs or certain pieces of theirs. They have no idea I'm looking at them, and I'm obsessed with waiting for someone to list it or waiting for the price to go down or what have you. I'm just like sitting here waiting, and there are some folks on this call I've waited for 3 years and still haven't found, almost 3 years, and still haven't gotten to the right spot. But it doesn't mean I'm always watching. And that SuperRare thing again I've picked off a few other things like that I don't talk about it. I'm not looking for the spotlight. I'm not bragging about it, but that's the Skull of Luci was probably relative to where that current price was probably the best thing, at least financially that I was able to find. And, hats off to Sam Spratt. Sam DM'd me afterwards, and Joey.eth as well, who I love both of them. And we were just laughing about it. And Joey ended up making a, what do you call them? I can't remember the name. What those idiots, those island boys that used to do these videos all the time. And Joey ended up making one that was super funny. And, we had a really good laugh about it too. So that was great.
It was a classic time. I remember that exact video very, very well. Let me ask you this. So your obsession with the space and with this phase, let's call it, of just where we sit, the relative history that's swirling around us, that I'm quite sure in 5, 10, 25, 50 years becomes more and more significant, right? Share that obsession with you. And I haven't heard it put quite like you did, where you were speaking directly to artists and just saying, hey, if that moment hasn't come, it's not maybe for lack of trying in some of these cases where you have been, let's say, refreshing particular artworks, or you have your opinions revolving around that. What's your underlying motivation, right? Where's this all headed for you in terms of putting yourself out there in that type of a way, right? Obsession is amazingly inspiring. It's also taxing. It's also a commitment. It also requires conviction over a prolonged period of time. What's your ultimate endgame?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, and the answer I'm going to give will sound like 100% bullshit to a lot of people, but it's not. So I have to back up here and give you a little bit of context. So I was very lucky in my life to work in a job where I was able to make some money. And had I stuck around, I would have made a shit ton more money. And I decided that money is just not the motivating factor for me. I decided that this is kind of like 2015, call it. I decided that I wanted to do things that more or less helped people out. And I still ran, I came out of the public stock market. And so I still ran my own portfolio and was very focused on that. But I spent a lot of time doing charity work and charitable causes. And the one thing about charity is that a lot of people tend to cut a check and kind of sort of keep up with the organization, but not really. Next year rolls around. Hey, how'd you do? Oh, we did great. Blah, blah, blah. We helped out, 1,500 people or whatever. That sounds great. Here's another check. And it just kind of goes through that. And that to me is just not that meaningful. I don't really care. I can cut the check. That's fine. But I'm way more interested in being a part of the result. So I started doing like a bunch of stuff like that. And I would always been interested in the blockchain and in crypto and in DeFi and so forth, because I hate intermediaries. I mean, any point of friction between point A and point Z is just annoying to me. I just, these people are generally just taking money without doing a lot of work on behalf of the creator or the person at point A, and there's nowhere that I have found where that's more acute than the art world. I think music is actually like 10. Whatever you think about the art world, music's like 10x worse. The labels end up taking like a ton of the revenue, and that just annoys me. I don't know why. I don't have any skin in the game on either side. It just like annoys the shit out of me that somebody would take that much money from a creator. But it was an unbelievable match for me because of what I just said. And the coolest part about it is that you get to be along for the ride, right? I mean, like if I give, let's say $50,000 to the United Way, again, they'll come back to me and tell me what their results are. But I don't have a piece of, I'm rooting for the United Way, but I don't really have a lot of skin in the game other than cutting them a check every year and watching them, do great things. With this model, I get to empower creators. I get to get a beautiful piece of, their spirit, their creativity. I get to be along for the ride. I get to talk with them. I get to meet with them. Like, holy crap, this is awesome. Wow, this is like supercharged charity to me. And there's potentially like, a win-win in it for everyone. It's like, I don't really spend a ton of time thinking like, oh, am I going to make 3x on this piece versus 5x on this piece? But there is that aspect to this. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say there's a financial aspect to this, where I think, not only are you along for the ride, not only are you empowering the creator, but if it works out, being along for the ride is also helps financially. And then you can feed, every dime I've ever made selling an NFT, and I haven't sold that much, but every dime I've ever made has been put back into the ecosystem. And I don't see like any reason why that shouldn't continue. So you get this self-reinforcing mechanism to go along with it. Like, I don't know, it checks every single box to me. And you have the benefit of like everyone hates us, right? No, like, I mean, the chat art world is like, these guys are kooks. Oh, it's all crypto. You have this real affiliation with crypto and FTX that's just totally unfair. With PFPs, it's totally unfair. So, like, I get to make a difference in this space, and that's really fun.
And I think that's the base value proposition, at least speaking for myself, that brings me back time and time again. The opportunity for a collaborative win-win. It just doesn't exist many places in life like that, right? Where you really can meet in the middle within a young industry, looking ahead with a massive opportunity for everyone to grow together. I think it was Grant Yoon who posted the other day, within the past few days, and just talked about how obvious the win-win, the opportunity for collaboration is, the obviousness that we should all be supporting one another and rising together. And I think this is one of those moments. This is one of those times and places where that's true.
I told you my background was in financial, and I've been through a lot of bull markets and a lot of bear markets. And my personal feeling in the bull market is identical to what it is today, near the depths of the bear market, which is, this is a fabulous space. I love it so much. I'm really into it. I'm very enthusiastic about it. I feel honored to be here. I feel honored to be amongst, the first folks to be here, fairly early. And I don't know, I don't really sit around and think about, wow, we're in a bear market and now all the stuff I bought in 2021 is worth a lot less. Like, who cares? That's not why I was doing it anyway.
What would you say is the most critical, or couple most critical things we should all have our eyes trained on for the healthy growth of the space, right? To really put this all in a position of strength, right? Relative to Tradar, right? Not to say eat its lunch, but to say, hey, this is now respected and a part of, and the mainstream's a tricky word, but I think you know what I mean when I'm asking this question.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that are out of our control. Number one is time. I mean, it's just going to take time to be accepted. And, I think it was fairly unheard of that Christie's and Sotheby's would be running major trad art auctions with digital art in them like they have been in the last couple of months. Like 2 years ago, they would have been laughed out of the room, and now that's come around. So I just think time is one of those things, and patience. The display technology is clearly a huge one. I think that's an underappreciated part of this. People like me and you and Moderats and Token Angels, like, we are just going to collect for the love of collecting, and wait for the display technology to show up. Most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to be very insistent that they're able to display whatever they buy in their homes. And I don't blame them. And I think that's right. And to be honest, the display technology I've seen so far that's good, costs like a new car. It's like, there's no way. I mean, you could buy a flat screen for $500 at Best Buy. Like, there's no reason why you should have to spend 30 grand on a display technology. So that's going to improve over time. But I think that's a huge one. And then the third one that's out of our control is very clearly like the onboarding and the whole ecosystem. Like, it's just, you can't have, North Koreans and Russians and all that stealing our shit. It's just like, you can't, it's got to be protected, and it's got to be in a way where, again, family members can understand it. And that's really the chasm right now. There's this guy, Michael Moore, wrote this great book back in the 90s on technology, but I think it's applicable here, where it's like you get this huge wave of early adopters, and then you have this chasm where you need to get across to get to mainstream. And I see that chasm getting smaller, but it's still big. It's still big. It's like having to onboard into ETH and then MetaMask and then protecting your assets. And then, it's just like, it's a nightmare. So that's external. I think internally, what can we do? From a creative standpoint, just keep creating. You just have to survive. The biggest tragedy would be if we have all this explosion of creativity And then half this ecosystem has to leave, and because it's just financially not lucrative enough to stick around anymore. That to me is a very tragic story. So I think, my advice to the creator side of things is try and survive as long as you can, because this bear market, as we've seen in the last week, we're not always going to be in a bear market. We're going to come out of it. I mean, you can look at this current situation as glass half full or glass half empty, and the half empty point of view is like, wow, that was a crazy bull market in 21, and now we're falling by the day. And I think the glass half full look is, hey, we just went through FTX, 3AC, and Celsius and Terra Luna, and blew sky high, and yet we're all still here. That says a lot about survivability, and I just think, be prepared for it to go on a bit longer, but also try your best to survive. I really think that the ongoing creativity by artists is really the driver of what I think that's really the driver long term. I think, kind of, if you build it, they will come. If you keep creating, people are going to start noticing, and they are starting to notice. It's just taking a while because we're in a bear market. I think the platforms need to improve. I think discoverability in a space is atrocious. I think they already know that. So that's a part of it. There's probably a couple other things, but I'll stop there. I've been rambling on.
I want to go back and key in on something important, because it can feel like a conflict at first. I'm curious how you see it progressing, because obviously doing some amazing work, aligned with 6529. 6529, we've seen an incredible surge in the memes community this past week, as some other things have surged as well. But to key back in on the barrier to entry, meaning the tech barrier to entry, people feeling like, MetaMask, and do they get a ledger, and how do they keep things safe, security, scams, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see that progressing? Do you feel like decentralization will be non-existent, a small niche, a strong niche, relative to more seamless tech solutions, and maybe some centralization trade-offs coming?
I think it's going to be a menu of those. I think it is extremely important to preserve self-custody for people who want it, like me. I absolutely, I was lucky enough not to be involved in FTX or any of the other things that blew sky high. I'm a huge believer in decentralization and self-custody. So I think that is very important to preserve. I think there are people who don't want that, who will say, I would rather have my NFTs stored on a Coinbase server, and I trust them to look over it. That's fine. That is their choice, and I think they should have that choice. There are people who are going to say, there was all this controversy around Ledger, swapping over, and I think the way they did it was poor. But the ultimate idea was actually quite a good one, which is, if it was a three-party custody solution, we're just going to keep iterating on these custody solutions until we come up with something that will be more palatable to mainstream. And there's probably going to be a learning curve for people to get on board, but we'll get there. I mean, the technology is coming along. It's a lot slower than I would have thought and hoped for, but it is coming along. And I do see signs. I mean, there are definitely technologies out there that I look at on, it seems like on a weekly basis, that are step function improvements over what we have. Now we just need to, get into a testing phase, make sure they're safe, and start rolling them out. It's coming. I can feel it coming. It's building. It's not here yet, though.
I like the take. I also like the willingness to say, hey, different solutions for different people. I think that's a very, 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 very important. I think there are, there are maxis out there who have very strong viewpoints on one side or the other. But I tend to think that viewpoint is the healthiest. I want to give you a menu of opportunities for quick takes, because you do, again, to go back to it, have one of the most incredible art collections out there.
Thank you.
And it's stunning. I highly suggest people just go to SuperRare and just look at some of these artworks. I'm going to throw some things at you, and I would love your quick takes. And if you want to go a little deeper than that, please feel free. Number one, the SuperRare Pass. As the first iteration, or maybe only iteration, first iteration, we'll see. But as this comes to a conclusion, how do you feel about it looking back?
From a collector standpoint, it was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. I mean, some of the coolest stuff I've collected in the past year has come from that pass. There are some artists on there that I hadn't collected before that I thought just did a fantastic job. And it was just cool. I mean, it was an interesting way to get art in people's hands. I think that the next iteration of a pass like that, by the way, should be for discoverability, new artists who don't necessarily have the established name like an X-Copy or Matt Kane or Sarah Zucker. I think that would be awesome. I mean, for people who really appreciate art, have a curated pass done by SuperRare that sends art from emerging artists to people. I just think that would be a great idea. If you ask the artists what they think of the pass, I think you're going to get a much more mixed reaction. I mean, we had contractual obligations was a very clear statement of what Matt Kane thinks about it. I think Max Osiris as well, who's a phenomenal artist, has strong opinions about it. So, if you're asking me, I can only answer this from a collector standpoint. I thought it was really good. I think from the artist standpoint, you'll have to ask the artist community what they thought about it, and I think you'll get mixed reviews. But I'm not going to pretend to speak for them.
Not to the exclusion of anyone you do not mention, but if you were to look back at all of the various NFTs that came to you as a result of the SuperRare Pass, and maybe even in an instance of getting lucky on a particular one, what is the most memorable one to you today?
Oh gosh, I hate these questions because they involve more exclusion than inclusion. I will say that the one that resonated with me the most was Sarah Zucker's Temporal. I just thought that was such a cool drop. It was well within her her body of just like what she is known for, I guess is what I would say. But it was different as well. It was such a cool drop. I really vibed with it. I thought it was great. I ended up buying a couple more, and I just think she's great. And I thought that drop was like very innovative, but also well within her, within her style. Very recognizable, Sarah Zucker.
All right, so I put my foot in my mouth first. I will avoid those. And I know there's always there's always that exclusive.
But like as I'm answering that question, I'm thinking about Otherworld's drop. I'm thinking about OSF. I'm thinking about Krista Kim. It's like, and there's Coldy had a great one. There's like I really mean it when I said like the art that I got off of that from that pass. I just loved. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a cool concept, and from a collector standpoint, I really enjoyed it.
Keying in on one artist you mentioned, Matt Kane, and you said it's clear how he's felt with contractual obligations. How do you feel about the acts that are rolling out in the game that's in progress?
I think I'm probably not in the majority on this opinion, but I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's one of the best drops of the year. I'll be the first to say when I first got it, I was like, this is a little weird. Certainly not within the Matt Kane body of work. And then that was the point. That was the entire point, was that, I think he asked the question, what is a Matt Kane? What does it mean to own a Matt Kane? And a lot of people got this, the initial contractual obligation drop and were like, this sucks, and I think the whole point was that it was like, what does it made you think? What does it mean to own a Matt Kane? And then you had a different act. And I think the SuperRare spaces that he did was one of the more fascinating spaces I've ever listened to. I thought that was a really interesting viewpoints from all sides, not just Matt's side. And really cool. Like, we're really like, it made me think. It made, it was a statement. It was a very powerful, I thought, statement about what this space was and where it is right now. I really got it, and I really vibed with it the whole time, all along the way.
Yeah, well said. I'll leave it there because I think you echo my opinion pretty well. Okay, Grant Yoon. You mentioned Grant Yoon. First artwork ever on SuperRare is in your wallet. How did that come about?
That's another Skull of Luci. That was another. I think someone listed it for like 3 or 4 ETH, and this was back when I was fighting NorCal. It seemed like daily for Genesis pieces, I just happened to see it, and I really love Grant, and both as an artist, not just as an artist, but also as a person. He's he's just such a cool artist. He's a break dancer and a doctor and all that. And I'm like, geez, this guy is like got like 5 things that he can do that I'll never be able to do. Like he's just unbelievable. So like I just really like him as an artist, and I really like his art. And this thing popped up, and it was like an absolute no brainer. Like this is for sure, something I'm going to add. And that was a 2-second decision. So yeah, that's how that came about. There was no negotiation. I don't even know who the seller was. It just popped up on SuperRare site, and I happened to be looking.
We'll leave the seller out of it. I don't know that's a decision they're thrilled with today, but hey, that's another time and place. Same question, Claire Silver.
So I ended up buying her piece called Claire, which in my, again, this is just me, my opinion. We all have our opinions, and I respect everyone on this. I think is one of the best AI pieces I've seen out there. It is absolutely phenomenal. I really resonated with it. And it was expensive. It was a lot more than I wanted to pay at the time. And there's a collector out there named Jeebs who texted me the day of and was like, "You idiot, like wake up. This is like one of the coolest things out there, the coolest things I've seen." And I thought about it. I remember it specifically because I went to go. There's a Vietnamese restaurant by where I live that I love. I love Vietnamese food, and I was sitting in the restaurant by myself, and he sends me this text, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. Like if I'm gonna reach on something, for me it was a reach. Now in hindsight, I was an idiot to think that because I should have just grabbed it without even thinking about it. But at the time, I was a little hesitant. But now I think it's I'm really proud to have acquired it. It's one of the cooler things I think I've bought recently.
Last prompt, and then we're going to wrap up. Last prompt is a fun one, close to the heart. Alotta Money, Holy Disco Neural Chip. I was scrolling through the wallet and I stopped and paused and rewatched that for probably the 20th time in my life.
Yeah. That I think I was in a bidding war. It's ironic you mentioned that one because I was just in a bidding war with Basilius over a piece that I won on Foundation like 3 days ago, and I think I was in a bidding war with him on that, if I remember correctly. And I'm just, Alotta Money, may rest in peace, was such a cool artist, just did so many interesting things, really embraced the medium and just had this like really kooky sense of humor about it all, which I just loved. And this Holy Disco Neurochip piece that he did was like, it just really captured this, this moment of both digital art combined with, I don't know if you call it Baroque or what have you, but this like style, this old school style. And he just did it beautifully. And yeah, that's another one of my favorite pieces in my collection. I just think like every time I look at it, it makes me laugh.
Batsoupyum, as we wrap up, 2 final questions for the recording. Number 1, who should be a guest on the Future of Art?
Wow. Oh boy, that is a really, really good question. Who should be a guest on the Future of Art? I don't know that there's any spokesperson for the future of art itself. I do think that if I were going to say something about the artist community, I think that the community, I'm just going to touch on royalties here because it's really tragic to me to see this kind of waning a little bit. And I think Matt Kane did a great job of, shining a spotlight on the royalty argument. If royalties are to be saved, I think the artist community is going to have to essentially unionize. And what I mean by that is that you're not going to have to unionize. I think there's going to have to be this recognition that artists need to join, that you do have power. I think all we've seen so far is collectors flexing their muscle and saying, hey, we're not going to pay royalties. And we have not yet seen any response from the art community saying, other than obviously Matt Kane's drop and some people saying, this is wrong, which I agree with. And I think there has to be, if this is going to be saved, I think there does have to be some, banding together by the artist community and saying, hey, we have power too. We don't have to do our drops on platforms that don't respect royalties. We don't have to, we can incentivize folks who pay royalties. I mean, there's nothing stopping an artist from doing a collection drop of, let's say 100 pieces, or let's say the SuperRare Pass, 250 pieces, holding, 50 of those back and saying, hey, if you, or, whatever, make it 300 and then holding 50 back and saying, hey, every collector who honored royalties in the past year gets put into a raffle or something, and you get a shot at winning another one of these or something like that. Something where there's more carrots rather than sticks. But my advice on who should be the next person, I don't think it should be the next person. I think the next person, the next people to join should be those that have a lot, have a willingness to try and band artists together on this royalty argument and see if there's a solution. And I don't know that there is. I just think that this is an argument worth having, and it's one worth saving, in my opinion.
And the last question for anyone who's hiding under a rock out there and doesn't know you or hasn't prior to today, where would you want to interact with somebody? Would you send them to your ex? Would you send them elsewhere?
Oh, I mean, really, my personality is my Twitter feed. It's like I said at the beginning of this space, I'm a bit of a degenerate. I like to have fun. I like to shit post a lot, but hopefully I also mix that in with saying some thoughtful things here and there that help people out. I'm here to help. I'm here to have fun at the same time. To me, that's all part of the ethos of this space. So yeah, if people want to interact with me and hear more about me, X is really the place where I do most of it. I keep a friend tech account. I'm more experimenting with it than anything. And I post some interesting stories on there once in a while, but really I think Twitter is the space where I do most of my finest shit posting, shall we say.
Batsoupyum, I know you are not a frequent interviewee, and I so appreciate you carving this time out. It's been a great conversation. I'm excited to talk further, but just really, really meaningful hour.
No, absolutely. Thank you again so much for having me. Thank you to everyone who made the time to join this call. I do really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Roger.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the future of art. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and onward to the many conversations that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, Artifex, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of Epic Games. Search Artifex Viewer on Apple and download our brand new free app to experience the sculptures in augmented reality. And visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.